So, Graveyard Keeper. Alright, this is a game that it's really hard for me because for every one step forward it takes one step back. For every good thing it does something that I don't like. It's a game that has great potential, but falters underneath its own weight. There's a very give and take relationship about everything in this game, and I'll break it down in these sections down below me here. Graphics, as you can tell, it's a pixel graphic game, 2D sprites, nothing too spectacular, but that's irrelevant. It doesn't mean that it's ugly or doesn't look good, and it doesn't mean that it's going to get inherently a lower score because it's a pixel graphic game. I tend to enjoy those personally. What I will say about the graphics is they did a good job of making sure that the graphics were standard in every area that you went to. There was a good level of consistency through the graphical style, and I think that while that does work for the game, it also makes it so that there's nothing visually in the game that stands out. There's no area of the game that is visually distinct and makes you stop and go, wow, that looks really nice, or that looks really good. And since the game uses sort of a muddled color palette to show how dreary the world is that you live in, the color palette for the game just comes off as really bland after about 10 or 15 hours. It's not unpleasant to look at, but it's definitely not pleasing to see after 30 or 40 hours. So, like, in good conscience, I can't give the graphics score above a 7. It's just above average. It's not in the good realm. It's definitely not in the great realm, but it's not average. Now, secondly, we have gameplay. Gameplay is... The standard gameplay loop for this game is... you wake up every day, you go do chores, you go do tasks, you go outside and you chop wood, then you use the wood to fulfill the requirements for other tasks that you need to accomplish. And initially in the game, it's nice and complex, and you constantly feel like there's something to do, something new to do, something to learn, a more efficient way to do something. But the basic gameplay loop really stumbles about halfway through the game. When you're about halfway through the game, you've unlocked a whole lot of new benches that have their own specific functionality. They do specific jobs, but there's no way to expedite the tedious tasks. There's zero automation in the game. With the exception of, things that cook, like furnaces and stoves. Those are, of course, automated. But at no point in the game are you ever going to figure out a method to drop logs somewhere, and they're going to get cut and get, cut into specific materials so that way you don't have to do those tasks. So even 40 hours into the game, you've got to put everything on hold so that way you can go chop 200 trees or however many to get the wood that you need to accomplish a task. And that is present in every one of the areas that you can craft something. They're all very, very, very specific, and there's almost no interplay between any of them. Just as an example, the quarry that you can unlock is it's really nice because it gives you really close access to iron ore, stone, coal, and marble. The issue is that the only tables that you can build up there are stone-related tables. So if you want to harvest lots of marble, for an example, you need wedges. You can't build any wood harvesting material up near the quarry, so you have to go back home, harvest your wood, turn it into wedges, and then go back up. And then you have to, you spend all of your wedges and you have to go back down again. And it just creates this slog later in the game. And that detracts from the basic gameplay loop, because after a while, everything just starts to feel like a chore. You feel like the time that you spend doing things that you've been doing for 20 hours is just wasted, and it loses its fun or its allure after a time. So for gameplay, I gotta give it a 7. I would love to give it higher than that. It's just that, like I said, with there not being any automation and no way to whittle out the tedious tasks from the beginning of the game, and just the rigidly specific functions each table does, it really just detracts from the overall experience. Now for the sound design in the game, sound design is probably one of the hardest things. No, it's easy. It's not good. It's not bad, but it's not good. The one soundtrack that you hear, the one that's playing now, is the one soundtrack that plays from day one. The sounds, the sound effects that you hear when you're chopping wood or operating the buzzsaw or the potter's wheel or whatever are nice, but they're very muted, so you don't really notice them, and when you do, it's very briefly and intermittently. And without any sort of varying soundtrack, like, I'm sick and tired of hearing this track. Like, I'm tired of hearing it. Like, in a game like Stardew Valley, the track is a little bit peppier. It's a little bit more upbeat, so you don't really get tired of hearing it. And then, you know, on rainy days, the track changes. On snowy days, the track changes. In different areas, the track changes. In this game, this is the track. That is it. I would have liked there to have been a little bit more variety in the soundtrack. I think that it definitely it hampers the game, but not to a great degree, because it's not hugely important to the overall game experience, but it does definitely hamper it, in my opinion. So I can only give the soundtrack a 6. Like, the sound design, I can't go any better than that. Like, I think I'm probably being generous at a 6, but I enjoyed it well enough. I enjoyed it for 20 plus hours before I really got tired of hearing the track, so that's fine in my opinion. Now, level design is one of those in this game where I think with a little bit of polish, like if they altered the game world just a little bit, that it could be phenomenal. If there was a way to travel the town, or travel like to the church and to the town and back home more quickly, I think that it would definitely warrant a better score. But until they introduce something like a horse, or, I don't know, a friggin' zombie bunny rabbit that you can ride, whatever it is, until they introduce a way to run faster in the game, the level design kind of suffers in being too big. One thing that I will say about this game is that it seems like the developer had plans for the game to be a little bit more grand in its scale. Like with the crematorium, you can have 4 pyres, but you only get 1 body per day, and unless you're completely ignoring the bodies that are coming in, you never need more than 1, so why have the ability to build 4? With, like, trees, you can harvest plenty of trees in a single day to accomplish whatever task it is that you need to accomplish. So the majority of the trees are just there for show. And so I think if they downsized the world just a little bit, or gave you a way to travel a little bit faster, that way the world seemed a little bit smaller, then I definitely think that the level design would be a lot better. The dungeon was extremely disappointing. It was very, very disappointing. It was extremely linear. The levels were not interesting. The fact that there's only like 3 enemy types down there, and they're all repeating every 5 floors or so. Well, 4 with the 5, with the little goop spitter and the golems. But every floor looks like the floor before it, it looks like the floor after it, and there's nothing visually interesting about the dungeon. The dungeon was by far my least favorite part of this game. It felt tacked on. It felt like, games of this nature tend to have a mine or a dungeon or something that you can explore for combat, so we have to have that too. And they didn't think through the design on the dungeon, I don't think. And in my opinion, the fact that you have to explore the dungeon for the story, it definitely detracts from the game. And I'm including this in the level design because it's more of a critique about the design of the dungeon, not so much the fact that there is a dungeon or how it plays into the story. But again, like, the game does well in making the world feel full, but it also steps back because the world, while full, is very empty. There's not a whole lot going on. So I can't give it better than a 7. It's slightly above average. You know, it's okay, there's potential, but it's not good. It's not bad, but it's not good. Now for the story in this game, the story, I enjoyed bits of the story. The dark humor that's present throughout the game is fantastic. I think that that's a great it's a great inclusion to the game. It's definitely something that helps pull the game up and bolsters the game. The communist donkey is wonderful. I think that that's fantastic. But the rest of the story, your motivation is you got to find your love. You're trying to get back to your love. And that's it. You don't really get a whole lot of exposition on any of the other characters. You don't expect a lot of exposition in a game like this. You get, little tidbits from the other characters, and that's about it. The fact that every step of every quest requires something specific from you, and you don't know in advance. You can't know in advance what it is that you're going to need. I think definitely hinders the story because everything feels like it's locked behind the game version of a paywall. In that, you have to have this item to advance every single time. You need an item, you need an item, you need an item every single time. There's very few dialogue progressions to the story, which I found to be very disappointing. And yeah, the story, again, I give it a 7.5 because I like the dark humor. I like the communist donkey. I like the presentation that the world is sort of, it's different. We don't eat cows. They're our friends. We eat people. There's nobody is batting an eye in a world where people meat is the norm, that a graveyard keeper shows up out of nowhere and starts selling them meat. They don't care. The fact that, I don't want to bury this body. I'm going to dump it downriver. Okay. It's entertaining. So the story, give it a 7.5. And that's the best that I can do. I wish there was more to it. I wish that it would have been more interesting. But it's just average, right above average. Now, overall, I'm actually going to alter this. I'll speak my piece, but I am going to alter whatever the overall score pops up as, because I can't remember what I gave it. But now that I've gotten to the end of the game, I think that I'm going to change it. The overall score for this game, like I said, graphics, they don't weigh too heavily for me. So, 7's fair. Gameplay, that's really hurting the game, because this is a game that revolves around its minute-to-minute gameplay. And for it to have so many hiccups and so many stumbles in the gameplay, it really damages the overall score of the game. The sound design, again, not huge, but it does play a factor. And that's in my opinion, the worst part about the game is the soundtrack. The level design is forgivable to a degree, with the exception of the dungeon. I would have liked to have seen something more interesting about the dungeon. It just felt tacked on. Now, the biggest thing that's going to hurt this game, and we're skipping over story because I was pretty fleshed out in that just then. The biggest thing that's going to hurt this game in terms of its overall score is the end of the game. The fact that the end of the game, maybe I did something out of sequence, maybe I did something out of order, that is entirely possible. But the fact that it boils down to get me an item, wait a week, get me an item, wait a week. Now we can do this sequence. That to me was just abhorrently painful. It was boring. It was a slog. It really, really tarnished the game. One of the biggest problems that I have with this game in regards to games that are in the same category is something like Stardew Valley, something like Harvest Moon, maybe Animal Crossing to a varied degree. In those games, the townspeople that you need to interact with for specific storylines or quests are present most days. They are inaccessible 1 or 2 days out of the week. In this game, the people that you need to advance the story are present 1 day a week. That's it. So if you miss your opportunity to speak to them, or you forget to speak to them, or you get wrapped up doing something else, then you have to wait an entire week before you can talk to them again. And that is just, to me, inexcusable. And the fact that it's like that for every single one of them really hurts this game overall. It really does. So initially, I put down a 7 as the overall, but I am going to go ahead and change this. We are going to change this here to a 6. The end of the game really, really damages this score. And I think given the way that the story finalized and progressed at the end, I think giving this game a 6 is generous. Now, the final verdict, the overall. Buy it, yes, no, wait for sale. Would I recommend the game? Yeah, I would recommend the game. It's a fun game. It's not super expensive. There's definitely more than, I think it's $30. There's definitely more than $30 worth of entertainment in this game. I won't say that there isn't. I would recommend the game, but know what you're getting into. If you're expecting a super polished experience, you're not going to get it here. Know that this game's going to have its hiccups, it's going to have its stumbles, and it's going to be slow. It's going to be a grind, and it's going to be a grind. But I would recommend the game if you want to wait for a sale. That's probably best. Wait till you get it like, a third off or, 25% off. It's definitely... That was just mean, Jabolin. But yeah, wait until you can get the game on sale. That would be my ultimate recommendation, is if you can get it for, a third off or 25% off, then do it then. I can't say pay full price for the game. But I'm going to do something a little different here that I don't usually do. If you're catching this video on YouTube, please feel free to tune into the live stream at twitch.tv/Frozen, FROHSINN. If you enjoyed the review, we stream 5 days a week over on the channel, so hopefully we'll see you then. All right? That was weird. That was really weird.